Welcome to the latest Pinnacle Forum podcast on stewarding the influence that God has given you. This is a series of conversations with leaders who happen to be Christians. Many are fellow partners and are also currently involved in one of our forums. As leaders in our fields, we gain influence. We may think that our influence came because of our intellect, our looks, our luck, our personality, and it's for our own use. The reality is that God grants this for us to use in the advancement of His kingdom. These are the stories of people who are learning how to use that God-given influence in service to others and ultimately to God. We trust these will encourage you as you steward your own God-given influence. Now on to our discussion.
In this case, we're going to talk about one particular forum who is no longer with us. So I'm not going to be interviewing Jeff Andersen. I'm going to be interviewing people who knew Jeff Andersen and can talk about the way he stewarded the influence that God had given him. Each of these people, each of these men knew Jeff intimately. They were in forums that he either led or participated in. And we'll be going through talking about our friend who's now with Jesus in heaven, doing whatever people do when they're in heaven. I guess we won't know until we get there. So guys, thank you. I've got Dwight Ham from a Thursday forum, John Evans, Eamon Ross, Roland Wheeler, we call him Sandy, Marsh Bull, Wade Rasmussen, Eric Johnson, and Lee Jenkins. And they were in 3 or 4 different forums with Jeff, so we've got some things to share with each other. Guys, I'd like to start off with, why don't you think of a funny story? And this should be pretty easy because he was a wealth of humor. Let's think of a funny story that you can remember about our friend Jeff. And if we have long pauses, that's okay because Candace will edit them out.
When I first had gotten a little bit closer with Jeff, and he decided to travel around, and he's in this Prius, and he surprised the group, and he decided that he still wanted to lead while he's driving 80 miles an hour down the highway. And so I didn't believe it. So he ends up taking his phone or camera, whatever it is, and he shows the highway that he's on, and then he puts it back. And so I thought this guy was nuts at first. But as the time went on, I realized what a great guy he is, and how he is. It's going to be hard to replace that man.
And if you spent much time on the phone with him, you knew that he slowed down to 80 miles an hour to lead your forum.
That's right.
by quite a bit.
Because I got pictures of his speedometer at 100, better than 100 miles an hour.
He didn't believe in being late.
Yeah. Well, I got mine is a combined kind of funny story, and I would title it "Where is Matt Lauer?" And ours was, "Where is Jeff Andersen?" Because he'd pop up here, pop up there. He might even pop up in our front room. Eric, you joined me when I think it was 2 days out of open heart surgery or something. And there's Jeff and Wendy fixing us a bit of pizza. But you know what? I put him as a free spirit or happy wander driven by the Holy Spirit. And it allowed him to get around. And if you weren't careful, he might be spending the night with you and having breakfast. I think he loved Pinnacle forum types. And the funny thing was, in the process, he became the face of Pinnacle forum to many of us in a very joyful and special way. The whole thing was funny.
Yeah, I love Jeff. He definitely lived with the throttle stuck on wide open, and was not afraid to invite himself into your life and be a part of your timeline. I remember when he first recruited me to Pinnacle, he called me in his special kind of dry humor way, said, "I need you to come be part of this group to lower the average age level."
Man, that hurts.
And I knew I was going to like the guy right away. And, just such an incredible person, just a few months into being part of his group. And we talked almost on a weekly basis outside of the group. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to come to your house," much like, you were saying, John. And I said, okay. I said, when? And he's like, in 2 days. I said, okay. And so my wife and 3 daughters and I kind of got the room ready for him. He drove up here, and it wasn't a short drive, it was a 6-hour drive from where he was at. And then he drove an hour and a half out of the way to go to this little monastery that had these treats that he really liked that he wanted to share with us, and brought him on his way up to the house and spent the night, like you said, had breakfast the next morning, and then made his way up to Sandy in Washington.
Well, this is Lee Jenkins. I'll tell you a story about his fast driving didn't work. We were in Scottsdale. It was on February 2nd, over a year ago. And we were looking around the art shows that are here from the middle of January to the end of March. And Nikki was on the phone, and she said, Jeff, it's 2/2/22. We should have gotten married today. He said, there's not time. I'll be right there. And he jumped in the car in Scottsdale and hightailed it to Tucson. And really, they were going to get married that day. And it didn't work. He got to the county courthouse at 5:01 and they wouldn't marry him.
Unbelievable.
So they decided, well, now we're going to choose Cinco de Mayo. And so that's when they got married, May 5th.
By Elvis Presley, nonetheless.
By an Elvis Presley impersonator.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was the thing about Jeff. He, you go, oh my goodness, he's okay. You have to all watch the video. Those of you who could make it to Vegas. So we're watching the video. And then I see Elvis come on board and doing the whole thing. And I'm looking at the audience. I go, man, I come from a kind of a conservative background. I said, this is really something else. And this guy loves Jesus. And I actually found his way to be so refreshing and encouragement to me. And you talk about smiles and laughs. That's, I'm like happy for them, Jeff and Nikki, and then I'm laughing at the same time. Said, this is really something else. But he really meant it. His vows were loving and sincere. And gosh, he was madly in love with Nikki. They were just really made a wonderful couple. And I remember going out there for the time with Richard, and Jeff and Nikki drove my wife and I back to the hotel, and just watching those two interact and talk and communicate. And, it was just really great to see that, because they were both so in love and they're checking out everything. And, we have to be that way in our marriages, just to keep that freshness. And I could witness it there with Jeff and Nikki. It was very, very special. But that's what I loved about Jeff.
So you're saying 60-year-old people can still be like acting like newlyweds?
I think so. We just celebrated 50, and man, I still hug and kiss my wife. That's for sure.
Dwight, remember, this is not an X-rated podcast. We're from Pinnacle Forum now.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We got to watch what we say.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you could only imagine what Jeff might be saying right now, but he would have us all laughing. He would just have us all laughing for sure.
Oh, he was so giddy at that lunch too with Richard and that all. He was just every time checking over on Nikki, making sure. Then he was on his best behavior, which was pretty amazing too. But one of my most recent experience with him, he is very famous for just jumping in the car and pulling things together right overnight. But he introduced me to a dear man and his daughter who run a pretty neat ministry over in Stanislaus County. But he said, hey, Eric, come on over next week. We're going to meet with Jack. And we sat down. I think we were supposed to meet for a half hour, and 3 hours later, and sandwiches and everything else, we were still trying to figure out our next meeting. But he had put together, and we were all just giggling at the table at all the ministry stuff, got it open, but giggling at the table at this gentleman introduced to us that is running 14 recovery homes for guys coming out of homelessness and out of incarceration. And long story short, these 14 homes that he runs with about 150 guys, we're going to be using about a third of them to build housing projects over in Modesto and Riverbank for us. And Jeff connected that all. He made it happen. It was he saw the vision and the heart and the people behind it. So he had a habit of doing this over and over again. In fact, one of the stories that he told just absolutely amazed me, where he went to live in Watts, where he wanted to, he's ministering in Watts with the very least of these. And he didn't want in any way to come into that situation where he would be advantaged. or any different than any of the guys he's ministering to. So he said he had sold everything he had. I mean, amazing, he had a coat on his back still, but he didn't have any assets to fall back on. He didn't have this, that, and the other thing. And he was just ministering bare naked, so to speak, with those that were right in front of him. So I was so impressed with that and so amazed, and at the same time fearful of his life. But this is the guy Jeff was, you know.
Yeah, this is Lee Jenkins. One of the stories he told was, I asked him, well, did you ever have your house burglarized or broken into or any problems? He said, no, none. I said, well, why? What did you do? He said, I was the Wi-Fi for the neighborhood. Anybody who wanted the passcode, just, the password, just come by and I'll give it to you. So the guys were sitting on his porch or in the driveway on the curb. They were just always there. There's always somebody watching his house because it was free Wi-Fi. And that's smart, just they all knew Jeff cared and they were going to take care of him. Nobody bothered his house.
I wonder why people keep gathering around my house. They're all tying into my Wi-Fi for free.
And your direct TV and everything else.
That's right.
Yeah, so.
Well, my experience with Jeff was a complete surprise. I don't know who said all of a sudden they get a call. Oh, I guess it was you, Eamon. And then here he comes, right? So he gave us about a 2.5 or 3 hour call out of the blue, said, hey, I'm in Seattle. I'm going to be headed somewhere. And Wenatchee's in the way. Do you mind if I come and spend the night and get to know you? And I kind of gulped because I hadn't really had that kind of relationship with him. And I said, well, yeah, I guess that'll be just fine. And so he pops in, and I kid you not, he barely made it up our hill to get his Prius into my garage. And for 4 days, that Prius sat in my garage as Jeff explained to me what a master mechanic he was. and he was working on this thing, and he would think he had it fixed. He started up, and it sounded so bad. I was really fearful. I told my wife, maybe we might have a permanent guest. Jeff may just be staying with us. But he was a hoot, and Diana just loved him and the stories he told, especially, coming out of Chicago and the serious side of him that he would do. And when he was here with that Prius, it was like 110 in Wenatchee. So we have a real dry heat on the east side of the Cascade Mountains. And kid you not, Jeff was here for 4 nights. And then in that process, he spotted a Harley that was sitting in my barn area. And he said, well, what are you doing with that? And I said, well, it's not mine. It's my brother. And he's getting ready to retire as a oil crane operator in Alaska for years. He's going to move to Hawaii. So I'm just storing it here till I put it on the ship. And I don't know if you've ever had Jeff be persistent at something that's on his mind or his intention. And I mean, to ad nauseum, he was on me about this Harley, how he had to buy that Harley. He finally got that Prius out of here, so that was good. We helped push him down the hill to say no return. But anyway, he stayed on me on that thing, and I said, okay, Jeff, okay, I'll ask my brother if he'll sell it to you, but I don't think he will because he bought it from me. The thing's never been in the rain. It only had like 8,000 miles on it. And it was completely tricked out. And I said, so I can't believe he'll do that, but I'll give him a call. And quite honestly, I didn't want to give him a call. I just wanted to call him back and say no. He said no because he wouldn't know. But have you guys ever had the Holy Spirit intervene?
That was right after you joined the forum group, right?
Yeah, that particular day, I really got a double dose. And so I called my brother and I said, listen, I know you're going to say no, but I told this guy I would pass on this message to you. And I told him who he was. And I said, John, he's fallen in love with that Harley. And he just is pestering me and said, whatever you want to sell it for, he'll buy it. So John gave it a few days. And of course, I think I had 4 more calls from Jeff in that just couple days. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Have you talked to him yet?
Yeah. So finally I said, okay, he said he would. Here's the price. Jeff said, so this is in summertime. Jeff finally calls me because I was saying, okay, but Jeff, can I meet you somewhere? I can haul it somewhere. What are you going to do? Because we're headed towards our late fall winter. Finally, one day he calls me up and says, can you get that to Spokane for me? He said, I'm going to fly in there late tonight. I said, man, I'm not sure you want to do that, Jeff. They're supposed to have a snowstorm, and that thing hasn't even been in the rain. So anyway, long story short, I haul it over there in my trailer, boom, get it out to Jana's house because that's the gal who's going to come and pick up. And sure enough, the next day, I get a picture of Jeff in a snowstorm in Montana, and he's got 2 not good passes he's got to go over. And this thing's never even been in the rain. And Jeff is riding it in a snowstorm. I said, Jeff, you just need to park that thing and just wait. You're going to have a wreck. He didn't. And he sends me one picture where he can hardly open up his hands. They're all covered, and he's covered in snow. How he doesn't have a wreck, but he was determined. He had a thing. I think it was a Saturday night appointment with Nikki.
He did.
That was his
yes.
love. And by gum, that guy did make it. But that's my kind of funny story with him. I don't know how funny 4 nights was with him, but it did have a sense of humor.
So Sandy, I got a call in the middle of the storm, and he said, John, be praying. He says, because I'm still courting Nikki. And I've got to be there Saturday night at 5:00. If not, I don't think she's going to marry me. He was trying to shake this flake, Jeff, and get on with a serious closure in his courtship with Nikki. And he probably slid in there on his Harley at 4:59. I had not heard, was it Wade who you shared he missed a wedding? I mean, that's classic, or Lee. Not too many people have done that and lived to tell it.
Chuck, sorry I had some trouble around here, but yeah, he's the only man that I ever know who has won back the heart of a woman. It doesn't happen. And so, because when they say you're gone or I'm moving on, and he did that. And so, I have a lot of memories. Chuck and Jeff and I got cancer at the same time in March. I have liver cancer and he got another cancer. So all our time we're talking about how we were going to lead people to Jesus who are a survivor of the cancer. And so I don't understand why he went so quickly, but my story is I went to their wedding. And so Jeff and I were brothers of another mother and Christian brothers. And so I'm standing in the back of the reception area and his best man comes up and says, Jeff, this is the best wedding I've ever been to. And I can look at him. And so this was the second wedding that he had been the best man. And both of us had been married 4 times in our life. And so the other thing is what I'm realizing with the guy, he always made me feel I'm like the only individual. Mm-hmm. I'm so special. And this is helping me understand the breadth and the depth of who he was.
He made you feel like the most important
yes.
man in the room or the moment. And here, I kind of thought about that earlier, Marsh, in that I also thought I was his best friend. Okay. The rest of you were just one notch below. I mean, he called me a lot. I never got a picture of 130 mile an hour speedometer like you did, Eamon. You need to kind of share the wild trip up I-5, North I-5 corridor. But if you were to, I would imagine, gather up some Western Division Pinnacle Forum guys and say, how many of you guys would call Jeff a good friend? I think more hands would go up. If there were 50 people in the room, all 50 hands would go up. And not many of us can say that at the end of our day, at the end of our time. So, but just so you guys know, I did have this special, I've got a trophy right here, best friend of Jeff here in my my trophy case. No,
That's because you took it from my house.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
He kept a
When he
box
was
of those.
helping you, right, Eric?
Kept a box of those.
Yeah, he ordered
Box
50
of
at
those in
once,
the trunk
John.
of his Prius and gave them to everybody he met.
Well, and that's precisely my point. And I think that's
Well, John, I have a question for you. How many
Yes,
nights
sir.
did he stay at your house?
Well, it's not 4 because Wendy was here.
Okay. Everybody in our forum were all threatened by Jeff that he was going to be coming, and it was kind of like waiting for Santa Claus, right? I mean, he's going to come down that chimney any moment now.
No, you wanted Santa Claus.
Be.
You wanted Santa Claus to come, and maybe not Jeff.
Yep. That's anyway. But when Jeff would give you a call, and if he knew you had a need, or he just called to say hello, and or just to say, hey, like what you shared today. It was very personable, and you just felt like you could talk to Jeff. And that's what was so neat about it. I just felt so comfortable with him. He was transparent. He was not afraid to let people know where he's been. Mm-hmm. And he was also not afraid to say what brought him out of it and how he's loving Christ and how he's committed, but also the struggles he would have. And he would really encourage all of us to be transparent. And that's a little bit more difficult for me. And I admired that it was easy for him to openly talk about issues. And I think that genuineness of Jeff and being off the wall in so many ways is what I like so much about him. I love that about him. And, you rarely meet somebody like that. It's unique. And you realize it was an entire life of a lot of issues, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of struggles, a lot of valleys, peaks and all that made him the kind of person he was. And I think in our forum, we were able to get a glimpse of that on Thursday mornings. And that was really, for me, it was priceless.
Well, the word to describe Jeff was an enigma.
There you go.
Okay. Here's a guy who lived in Watts and had nothing, right? But he went to Wenatchee and said, I like that motorcycle. How much? It doesn't matter. Just tell me how much and I'll buy it. And probably rolled off cash to buy it. Or certainly somehow God always provided for him. He showed up in Modesto and he needed a place to stay. And I was gone. So he says, well, where do you hide the key? So, we hadn't done that before, but I didn't know how to say no. So I told him where the key was hidden, and he stayed a week. I've got cameras all over the place, of course, except in the bathrooms and the bedrooms. But I see what's going on in the kitchen and outside and all that. So I'm watching Jeff as he pads out to the pool kitchen and hangs around in there for a little while, and then pads back into the house, pads through the living room. While he was here, I think he sharpened my knives. He changed all the light bulbs. He found little things around the house to fix and repair, stuff that I've been meaning to get around to for 5 or 10 years. And I came home and all this stuff is done and Jeff's gone and the house is locked up. And he would have never known he was there, except everything was repaired around the house.
That's a great story. That's a great story.
Indeed. What a happy wanderer our buddy was. Truly a free spirit. That's what I enjoyed the most about him. And he just, actually, to what you were saying, Dwight, was that he shared his life experiences unashamedly, but he would sit in our group, and to a man, we've got about 4 or 5 of us here, and he would be we'd get to the end of every session that he was on, and I'm leading that, and I'll say, Jeff, come on, don't leave here before you share whatever on the subject matter of the morning. And he would say, no, I want someone else to share before we wrap up here. So I would invariably call him and say, Jeff, we want you to share. You're not a satellite part of this group. You are very much a brother in Christ in this group. So you had his respect for letting others' needs go ahead of his, even when it came to airtime, which is hard to get in some of our Pinnacle forums. I mean, he was putting up with the likes of John Evans and Sandy Sutton and Dwight Ham, who can hold the forum without anyone else ever having to contribute time. So he just had a special flair about him. He did as everyone has indicated.
So I'll tell one more funny story while he was visiting. So we have a canal that goes by our place. And I was trying to talk Jeff. Every day I'd go in because we're 110 degrees. We had a heat wave here. And I go in and I said, Jeff, you just need to go in. And he'd been here sweating over that Prius. And I don't know how hot it was inside that garage, but it was warm. So one night, second night, all of a sudden I hear on my bedroom door. I look over, it's 12 o'clock. I think, what? I get up, my wife's awake by then. Says, what? Who's that? I said, it's got to be Jeff.
Who else would it be?
I don't know. So I go to the door, I open it up, and I go, yeah? He goes, I wanted you to be the first one to know. I went in the canal, and it was great. And I mean, Diana and I got to hooting and laughing. Who does that but Jeff? Oh, my God. The guy was simply unreal. I'm going, it's 12 o'clock at midnight. I don't give a rip if you went in the canal finally.
You couldn't have saved that till tomorrow morning.
Oh, gosh. He was a character. I mean, you just never knew what was going to happen next with him. So,
did he sell the Prius so he could buy the Harley?
Well, that would get, maybe that'd get a patch for the tires. That Prius.
Yeah.
You're the only person who said you had to push a car downhill to get rid of them.
well, that Prius was a sad story. It truly was. I don't know how that guy made it anywhere, but he did limp it out of my place. And
I tell you, I told Jeff, I said, oh, yeah, Kathy and I are going to Vegas. Our granddaughter's going to be in a gymnastics meet. And, oh, he said, you got to stay at this hotel. He said, I'm going to be there and you've got to stay there, to the rooms and everything. I said, Jeff, you don't have to do that. I mean, but he was so hospital. And so he got me this room and didn't cost anything. And, I went down, had dinner with him, and, it's kind of a smoke-filled kind of place, not the sort of place that I would normally go to. But I was just caught by his hospitality. And so I guess I got that end of it while you guys got the other side of it. But it was just vintage Jeff. And that was what was so good about it. I don't know that I'd ever go back to that hotel again, but I was grateful that my friend, and I would call him my friend, as all of us would, he thought of us. He said, well, you got to stay here. This is where you got to stay. I said, okay, Jeff, that's good enough for me. That's super. And when I told my niece where we were staying, she said, oh boy, So anyway, but it was quite a time.
Oh my.
I don't remember why, but I was riding with him one time, got in the car, and he shooed the dog into the back seat. And I think it was 2 or 3 weeks before I got all the dog hair. It was everywhere, and that's just Jeff's driving down the road, him and his dog, and that was pre-Nicky, of course. I imagine he probably had to vacuum the car for the wedding.
Hey, Eamon, you must have something to kick in.
Well, I don't know how much I want to share, but I know why Dwight got free hotel rooms in Vegas.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you
I
get the memo?
It wasn't my gambling.
We're not supposed to share that, Eamon. You didn't.
No, I mean, it's a cool story because Jeff was as comfortable sitting in the front row of the church leading the choir as he was, next to the guy at the blackjack table. I mean, Jeff took a course on counting cards. You know what I mean? Like just such a random Jeff thing. But that hotel, he won a lot of money from him. So they wanted him to come back. So they always gave him free hotel rooms.
Didn't he teach you the counting cards? I thought you said that, Eamon, as well.
Yep, we did that.
That's how you're going to fund your Kingdom project.
Right.
So wasn't he registered in the casinos? I mean, he got so good at it that they made him register, and he always assured me that it was not a problem, John.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't do it very often, but it was something that he liked, just to have fun. He loved like March Madness and have a annual get together for that, and just loved sports, competing, and having a good time fellowshipping with friends.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I just had Aaron a flashback because I was driving from Durango back to California, and so I met him at Roosevelt Lake and went bass fishing. And so Matt, my bass guide, likes to play poker and doesn't do very well. And so that night we'd been on the lake all day. And so we drove up whatever the casino is north of Roosevelt Lake up there. And he was going like 105, 110 along the ways, but I was comfortable because he knew what he was doing. And so we were there like 45 minutes. I think Matt lost quite a bit, and I didn't know the story about county. So he won like $450. And so I didn't know about the county, but he knew what he was doing.
You know, when I first became CEO of Pinnacle Forum, and if you've been in that position before, you know that there's always a bunch of stuff that you need to clean up before you can move forward. There was about 500 contacts that were in process that needed to be made. And I sensed that there wasn't going to be a whole lot of pay dirt in that list of projects. So I gave them to Jeff to work through because I didn't want to. You know, he diligently plowed through every one of those. I don't know that we picked up a single partner out of it, but he was not going to be deterred. He was going to be, I'm almost done, Chuck, another couple of days. I'm almost done, Chuck, another couple of days. And for about 2 months, he worked on those while he was doing everything else that he needed to do. But he finally did finish it. He saw it through.
Yeah, you could always count on him to whatever he starts, he finishes. And that is not all of us do that.
Yeah. One of the things you're talking about, how helpful he was, his stories about helping people in Watts are just amazing. Like, they're always getting there. They ran out of money. So they go to these places and cash their check early or borrow some money 3 days ahead before they get their check and pay a huge interest rate. And he'd figure out a way to say, okay, you're wasting all your money, but we'll give you some money interest free, but you got to take our finance class in order to learn how to not do that in the future. It was just that. And then he'd say the people down there don't have driver's licenses. Well, they know how to drive. They have cars. They just don't have a driver's license. Well, the problem was passing the driving test. So he'd help them do that. I mean, it's just whatever the need was, didn't matter who you were, he was there to help. Yeah, he was just genuine through and through. And the same, so that several things that we say about us who can afford to be in Pinnacle, he gave to the people who couldn't afford the next dollar to buy for the next dollar. It didn't matter. Just a man of God serving people and however he could.
Set a high bar, didn't he, Phyllis?
He did.
Sure did.
Yeah, particularly
Absolutely
now that we're hearing, Chuck, now that we're hearing collectively, which we probably wouldn't have. And one of the unfortunate things we all do is we kind of eulogize when someone is not with us.
Sure.
Which really leads me, if I could, Chuck, make a statement, is we need to have these conversations with neighbors and friends and family and brothers in Christ, and tell them how they've touched us, and tell them how funny that story was when they went bass fishing with them, and share it with them while they're here to enjoy it. We don't always have to have a front row seat in heaven to have.
Well, let me tell you something. This is Lee Jenkins. Gail and I went 2 or 3 Saturdays ago to a man that was extremely well known in the speaking industry, lots and lots of friends, and he was put on hospice. And he said, I don't need a funeral. I need a celebration while I'm alive. And we had 50 people filled it in his living room, sharing stories and enjoying his life. And he's on hospice with his hospice nurse there. So, it's possible to do that. Now, Jeff didn't have time. We know that. You don't always get that chance. But all of us in that room remembered, wow, at the day comes we're on hospice. We want to remember this. Doesn't mean we all decided to do it, but we loved that 3-hour time together with a good friend that was on hospice.
Well, Lee, that's precisely my feelings here, because I feel that badly this would have been a lot more fun sitting around in one of our living rooms all together instead of individually, as he kind of picked us off. Chuck, I think he sounds like he just was a man who once given the task stuck with it. And as you said, Wade, he completed it, which is a rare quality. I mean, if he changed Chuck's light bulbs, I mean, really, guys.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change his light bulbs.
Yeah, and Chuck said he didn't have any cameras in the toilets. I'll bet he cleaned the toilets before he left, or at least the one he used. Yeah, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
What a guy! How fortunate we all.
Says a lot about him.
Oh, doesn't
And
it?
didn't need the limelight to be on him.
No.
Was never looking for recognition.
No. In fact, he pushed that away. He would have felt uncomfortable if we were doing this in front of him.
You're right.
Which would have made it more fun.
Which would have made it
we could have roasted him
a
instead.
lot more
of,
fun.
I'm not sure he would have been uncomfortable. I'd have to think about that one for a little bit. No, he might have been, but I doubt he was so free flowing. Yeah, I'm just not sure. He was an absolute, as my wife would coin it, he was a hoot, and that's how she talked about him. Even when I was telling her his situation, and she said he was just a hoot, and she's not one to normally like someone to drop in uninvited.
Yeah.
So we called him semi-invited. He says he's coming, and like Chuck, he didn't ask me for the key, and I'm not sure I would have given it to him. But after 4 nights at our home, it was truly a blessing. And I think back, Chuck, to what you said about all of us going to Richard's event, that Jeff, in my mind, really took hold of that to make sure that we all would be there. And I thank God every day for, first of all of us getting together in person, and second, for being able to see our friend Richard.
Oh, look!
Yeah, right there. One last time. What a great time. And I hold this guy right there for spearheading that and not letting us back away from it, right? He just said, here's where it's going to be. And then we all agreed to get there. So what a time. Who shared that right there? Was that you, Chuck?
Well, Eric's the only one who's young enough to do that.
Oh, I should have guessed that.
Yeah, what a great time. And, that was the thing about the forum when Jeff was in it and he was leading it. Boy, every time we had so many good laughs and so many good discussions. It was great.
I don't know. Hey, Eric, put that back up for a second, if you wouldn't mind, buddy.
That's a very cool picture.
Yeah, it's a great picture. Can you pop that back up, Eric?
He can't. He's gone.
Okay.
When he let the picture go.
Well, I don't know.
He left for the picture.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw
There-
Nikki's. Watch. I hope we can get it back up, because take a look at Nikki.
I'm looking at the smile on Jeff and Nikki.
Well, Nikki's she was very bright that weekend. It was very special because Jeff was kind of like a debut in front of the Pinnacle Forum group to get our approval, let's say. Can you put that up there, Eric?
Oh, sure. Sorry about that.
Wendy's comment was, a hoot. Diana was a hoot. She said, "Holy crud, Batman! Who was that masked man?"
True.
And I took the French statements out of what she really said.
Well, what I'd like to do, like Richard left his wife here, Jeff left Nikki here.
Mm.
And I know it would mean a lot to Nikki. I imagine she'll watch this sooner or later. It would mean a lot to Nikki to hear from you guys what she meant to him. Maybe something he said to you that he never said to her. Maybe thoughts that he had. So maybe we can finish with that.
Marsh, you said it. Not too many people have won the hearts back of a situation such as he had found himself in, but it became so overridingly important to him. I think it was a watershed moment for Jeff to realize he succeeded in winning Nikki's heart back. That's how important Nikki became to him. It was a good finish for Jeff, because it just gives me bumps here, because the sparks, as you say, the foolish child's play or teenage play in the front seat, Dwight Hammer in the back seat, I guess it was just genuine.
Yep.
And Jeff made no mistake and didn't He always, I think, Chuck, to your point, he made sure that Nikki was every part of his conversation. And that's delightful. How many of us talk to each other about our wives?
He loved her very, very much. And he shared that openly with the group, how much he really cared. And he also said he didn't feel he was worthy of her, and he knew that she was very, very special for him. And he was hoping that she would love him as much. And of course she did, and improved every bit of that. And, it's really neat to see something like that, because you see, the second time, you just realize that there was always love there. And sometimes life has its rounds and has its ups and downs and has its bumps and sometimes its cliffs. And to see them get back together again, what a testimony that is. And it just shows the grace of God working through both of their lives in their love for each other.
Truly.
I really liked how, Jeff was he, like I said earlier, lived just kind of with the throttle stuck on open. So he was a very excitable person. And yet when he would talk about her, his level would elevate considerably. And it wasn't even as much of what he said, because he said a lot of amazing things about her, but it was how he said it and where it was coming from and the place in his heart. He definitely was just head over heels in love with her, and it just showed up all the time.
He was smitten.
I think he also had a absolute conviction to be Christ to Nikki in every way he could, and to how to live out Scripture practically, and how to take God's word seriously, and to be like Jesus to her. So I think that came out in the demeanor, both how he spoke about her, but how he treated her too. And hopefully all of us have an opportunity for Jesus to rub off on our spouses by how we treat them. But that was an amazing example for me to follow and to learn from.
Yes. So when Jeff and I were starting to get closer, he ended up telling me about Nikki. And this is before they started thinking about getting married. And he would always say, "Hey, I've got a friend that I'm going to go scuba diving with." And so I said, "Yeah. And is this friend he or is she?" and he says, "Well, it's a she." I said, "Oh, are you sharing the same bedroom?" And he says, "Of course not." So then he told me her name is Nikki, and he had mentioned the name before. But from that point on, he was telling me more about how much he cared for her as a friend. And then it started getting more intense. And so I think he started courting Nikki like how much he was pestering Sandy while Jeff was there. So I don't know if she was able to say no. But he was surely happy when he came back and he said, "Yeah, we're going to get married at some point." And man, he was beaming from that point on. Yeah.
So a testimony to back up that, Wade. I mean, who would drive a Harley in a snowstorm over the Cascades and make sure they were at her doorstep at 5 o'clock on Saturday? I'm serious. He said, "If I don't get to this particular date, it's over, because I've done that enough times." And she had the history, of course, with them the first time around in their marriage. But no one hops on a Harley and drives through snowstorms to do that. I mean, that sounds like a Hallmark movie to me, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
I think there's a scene like that in Dumb and Dumber, isn't there?
Yeah, or something.
Oh, nice going, Chuck. Oh my.
Well, Nikki, we don't think that Jeff was part of Dumb and Dumber, but he did some things that amazed all of us as he lived his life, as he pursued you, and as he loved you. We were all amazed to have a front row seat to watch, amazed and blessed.
That is absolutely true, Chuck. We did. We were right there as a part of that story all the way through. Every week, an update on how it was going with Nikki. Yeah.
So we're about out of time, and I hope you've enjoyed us reminiscing. It's hard to lose a friend, but we're praising God that we have an eternal life, that we know Jeff is with God and his son, and we'll all join him someday, and we can roast him there instead of just reminisce. And won't that be fun?
It will be.
From all of us to all of you listening out there somewhere to this unusual podcast, we hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you've begun to feel like you knew our friend, Jeff, who stewarded the influence that God has given him like few people that I ever knew. We trust that these stories are an encouragement to you as you steward the influence that God has given you, the way that Jeff stewarded the influence God gave him. Thank you for listening.